Hello.
Hey Shawn,
Yeah,
this is Anarka. Sorry I called you at 7:30 in the morning. I woke up at 9:30 thinking that it was 11:30 in your area, and I was like, "Oh shit!" I felt so bad.
that's okay. I turn my ringer off at night for exactly that reason.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I was like, "Oh my god, he's gonna kick my ass." So
I saw it when I woke up. I'm like, who the hell's calling me from San Francisco at 7 in the morning, whatever. But no matter. I slept through it. So
how are you doing, man?
good. How are you?
I'm pretty excited. Trying to get my record label up and running. I work for DoorDash and trying to put out a bunch of releases from the Philippines. I'm
Whoa.
I'm married over there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I had
Sounds good.
several questions to ask you, which I haven't heard all Youth Brigade albums. I've heard both Sound and Furies. I've heard Happy Hour, and I've heard Sync with California. I haven't heard them all because they're kind of hard to find. But I have been listening to your band. I'm 26 for probably about 10 years, 15 years maybe, and
Cool.
I wanted to bring up one track in particular. So, do you remember the name Lori Straightedge from Seattle?
Is that a person?
Yeah, Lori Strader. She's done one of your shows before back in the old days.
Yeah. Was she the one who did Should I forget the name of the club? But yeah, my brother's the one who really handles the booking, but it sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
she's got
I
pitch
remember
black
them.
hair.
Yeah, I mean, vaguely. I mean, he, like I said, he's the one that books the show, so he's the one that settles up. So
I
you
get you.
know,
But the reason I bring her up is because I'm not suicidal anymore, but I used to suffer from extreme depression, and I told her one day that I wanted to take my life, and she told me to listen to "Did You Want to Die" or "Did You Really Want to Die" by your band, and it really shook me.
wow,
And honestly,
okay,
it stopped me from yeah.
wow, that's great. Glad to hear that. That helped.
Yeah, I will say you are when it comes to punk rock vocalists, I put you on the same tier as Lee Ving because you get a very special, very unique sound to your voice. Like you actually can carry melodies, and it's not just ah. It's. Do you vocal train at all, or is it just natural?
Um, I mean, my voice is natural, and then when I was in college, I took a little bit. I took a music singing class in college at SMC, which was just kind of for fun and helped give me some, you know, some sort of guidance on how to deal with vocal range and control and all that sort of stuff. So that was pretty cool. And then I did take some lessons later, some years later. But it really just sort of helped me understand how to control my vocals and do exercises so I wouldn't strain my voice. But yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's a good singer is going to be naturally a good singer, and then taking classes and getting training is just going to help you control your voice better and learn ways to do things you probably wouldn't necessarily figure out on your own.
Yeah, I get you. Cause yeah, if I've never seen your band live, unfortunately, but when Youth Brigade is on the stereo, oh yeah, it's you could play 20 punk rock bands in a row, and yours is so easy to point out just because your voice style is so unique compared to so many others.
Oh, thanks.
So, how did Youth Brigade originally begin?
It was just me and my brothers had been playing together in high school, and then we got into the punk scene, and we started off, coincidentally enough, when I was taking that one class at Santa Monica City College, I had to sing a song every week in that class, and I didn't want to sing, just pop songs like
Yeah.
everybody else was singing. So I got interested in. I was going to the library to find interesting songs that would would sort of work with my vocals, something that interests me, and I started getting into some swing stuff. And then I decided we should start a band where we do swing music, because at the time was right around when the two-tone ska stuff was happening in London and England, with Specials and the Selector and Madness and English Beat and so on. So I thought, man, we have this house called Skinhead Manor, and I thought, well, we should do skinhead swing music, which so we tried, but we weren't good enough musicians to pull that off. And then out of the ashes of that attempt came Youth Brigade.
I was gonna say, I do see a bit of swing influence, but your band is one of the only punk rock bands that I know that I would also consider to be partially ragtime. You just have a
Well,
different bounce.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but after Youth Brigade broke up in the around, well, we morphed into the Brigade for about a year and a half, and then about 87, I guess, 87, 88, we did, the band just broke up completely. And within a year or two, my brothers, Adam and Mark, the bass player and the drummer, joined up with our younger brother, Jamie, who picked up my saxophone because I played sax in high school. And they started a swing band called Royal Crown Review. So,
I think I've heard of that, actually.
Yeah, they got pretty big for a while.
Yeah, I've always really liked that about your band. It's just, Youth Brigade is so unique in the sound. Like, I can't really name another American punk rock band who has that sort of ragtime sort of, like the song All Style No Substance. Do 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 do. That's so.
Yeah.
I love that. It's such an upper, and your lyrics overall are more positive and not nihilistic. Destroy the state. It's more positivity, which a lot of punk music doesn't have that, unfortunately.
Well, thanks. Appreciate that.
Of course, man. So where did the name Youth Brigade come from?
I don't know. We when we got into punk rock, which is in 1970, well, 70, 78 is when, 77 is when I started reading about it and hearing about it. And 78 is when we went to our first show. And as we were hanging out in that early LA scene, it was getting a little, it was a very small scene, and there was a lot of people that didn't like the look of punk rockers. They were called us weirdos and all that sort of stuff. And but that scene originally there were a lot of older people. I mean, my brother and I started playing music together. Mark, the drummer, who runs the label with me and runs Punk Rock Bowling with me. So I came up with this idea that, we should start an organization, because it was difficult to do shows during those times. A lot of the clubs they would do a show, and then the promoter or the owner wouldn't be into the way people looked, and so they started banning punk rock. They were saying it was attracting too much negative attention, and so we started a Better Youth organization with the idea that we could organize our own shows, we could organize our own more positive attitude and images of punk rock, because it was portrayed in the media as this sort of nihilistic anarchy, sort of negative. They just looked at all the connotations of the image and looked at it as negative, and we found it to be very positive and inspiring and uplifting. So that's why we started Better Youth Organization, and I guess Youth Brigade came out of this house we had, Skinhead Manor, which was kind of envisioned as a commune, but it sort of fell apart because too many people just wanted to party and get high and do stupid shit. So it's my idealism. When I was a senior in high school, I took an existential literature class, and that really inspired me. That's the time that I got involved in punk rock. So that all sort of came together, and it was a very idealistic time for me.
Damn nice. Yeah, you just answered the other question I was going to ask you. I was going to also bring up BYO, but thank you for that.
Sure.
One thing I've always wondered, why are there 2 Sound and Fury albums?
Well, we recorded we put together a compilation for the first release on BYO because we realized that, you know, it, people we had just been playing around for, I don't know, at that point for 6 months or a year, and we thought, look, if we do a compilation, we can get bands that are a little bit better known, and we can put bands that we like that are less known, and the bands that are known will help get people to buy the record and discover new stuff. So we did that. We found a studio called Mystic Studios, which I call Mistake because it was a big mistake to work with the guy who ran it. He turned out to be quite a snake oil salesman. But the studio was decent, and he did give us a lot of helpful information. You know, the problem with him was he just, music for him was a way to earn money, which there's nothing wrong with that, but he was very dishonest about it. And that's a whole nother story that there's no time to go into, but we recorded the record. Yeah, we recorded the compilation there, and it got a really good reaction. And, you know, we'd already written a bunch of songs for Youth Brigade and decided we were going to go in the studio. And we had already hatched the idea that we would go out and tour. And that tour, we took Social Distortion out in a big school bus, and that tour became the movie Another State of Mind, which is as much about us two bands.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, trailblazing across the U.S. and Canada in 1980, summer of 1980. It's as much a story about us punk bands going out and meeting other like-minded individuals in all these different cities and towns as it is about the bus, which kept breaking down and finally caused the whole thing to fall apart. We made it out to Washington, D.C. when it really started falling apart, and the other guys in Social Distortion flew home. Mike was the only one that stayed with us.
Mike Ness.
And we limped our way back to L.A. But you know, we recorded the record for the tour. We rushed it, and when we left on tour, the record wasn't even pressed yet. So we didn't get it until we were on the road. And when we finally did get copies of it, we listened to it, and it sounded. We just weren't happy with the production. We thought the mix was really bad, but it turned out, we discovered some years later, that it wasn't the mix that was the problem, it was the mastering. So when we remastered it eventually and released it as a CD only. But when we got back from the tour, we'd written a bunch of new songs, and we'd already stopped pressing on the original version of Sound and Fury. So we re-recorded it when we got back in over the course of a few months with an actual producer, Tom Wilson, and that's the version that everybody knows. That's the version that has Think with California and Men in Blue and all that stuff on it. So it's almost a completely different record. There's a few songs that are on both, but not many.
Yeah, I don't own them physically, but I have them digitally. Like I said, your albums are kind of hard to come across.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of stores anymore, so they aren't. All our stuff is pretty much still in print, but yeah, there's some changes being made with the label because it's just we're working on a deal so that someone else is gonna handle some of the day-to-day operations. But it's a difficult time for making physical product, making LPs and CDs. Because there isn't a huge crowd interested in buying it, and the cost to make them, because the demand is so low, has gotten even higher, which means you have to raise the prices. And it's just selling a few hundred copies here and there is just not worth when people can get the stuff digitally, and that seems to be where most people get their music from these days, which is fine. I mean, it's much better for the environment. You're not putting any chopping trees down and using petroleum products to make vinyl and CDs and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the model that iTunes created, which is great, where you could get a full LP for $10 and the band and the label gets 70% of that. Now you got Spotify, which pays, I'm not kidding you, 1/100th of a penny for every stream.
I've heard this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spotify is just evil.
Yeah, they totally are. They're totally evil, and they act like they're. Some people just don't understand how this business works, but they try to make the consumers, the fans, believe that somehow they've saved the music industry, which is the biggest crock of shit. They've destroyed the ability for artists to make money off of selling their music. So now the only thing artists can do is go out and play live, and now, of course, because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
can't do that. So it's really devastated. You know, the model before was you make a record, you tour to support the record, you get royalties, you know,
Yeah.
from sales of the record. And now there's no more sales of records. You know, streams are nothing. Spotify makes more money selling advertisement for the people that are going online to listen to your music, and it's not like they ask you permission. They just originally they would just put it up there, and they did everything in this country illegally. That's why they have class action lawsuits against themselves. But I digress.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've got a buddy who does I'm a music journalist on YouTube. I interview musicians and I review records sometimes. But I've got a buddy who does kind of what I do, only he just talks about the music industry, and he made a video comparing Spotify to Napster.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Yeah, it pretty much is piracy in another form.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they're paying, but they decide how much they're paying. And, you know, they went and they made a deal with all the big major labels, and those artists get more money than the independents, which is why I pulled all my stuff off of Spotify. The problem is, of course, I have it on all the other streaming sites, but because Spotify sort of set the bar on how much to pay, there would be no point for other streaming services to pay more because they wouldn't get any business because they'd have to charge people, and people aren't going to pay when they can just go to Spotify and either get it for free or subscribe for super cheap.
I can happily say that I always visit record stores and still try my best to get it physically, whether on CD, cassette, or vinyl. I've always been that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's great, but I always tell people, look, if you want to support artists, then download the record because they make a lot more money. They actually make money when you download versus when you're on streaming on Spotify. And a lot of artists on our label have complained to me, you know, we should be on Spotify. And I say, but why would you want to be on Spotify? You get no money from it. And they say for publicity. And I say, if you want to give away your music for publicity, I mean, for publicity for what? To sell what? You know, you're not selling records. They're ripping you off. So.
Yeah, it's like Paul McCartney once said, we had the best record label deal of all time for getting our music out there, but we had the worst record label deal of all time for financially, because he said in an interview a long time ago with, I think, Conan O'Brien or someone, that when the Beatles first started, they got screwed on the money part.
But in those days, all the artists got screwed. If you look at all the blues artists and the rock and roll artists and the rhythm and blues and they all made these contracts where the person who signed the contract, the record label, would take ownership of the song and ownership of the copyright and ownership of the publishing. And you know why? If you look at the history of the music business, for example, let's go back to before recorded music existed. A lot of people made their money. You know, musicians made their money by playing live, but there was a lot of songwriters. I don't know if you're familiar with music theory, but you know, with music theory, you don't even have to play an instrument. You can write music based on the mathematical properties, just like the great composers did. A lot, you know, they were all musicians. Most of them were musicians, but that did, you know, you guys who are writing songs but weren't out performing those songs. So how do they make music? Along comes a sheet music company, right? These guys, they say, all right, I'm gonna sell the sheet music so that people can buy it in the store and then take the sheet music home to play your song. And that's where the penny rate comes They would sell it for, a nickel, and 2.5 cents would go to the composer, and 2.5 cents would go to the company who manufactured the sheet music and sold it. Now, recorded music comes along, and I don't know why or how, but the sheet music maker, the publisher, as they call themselves, now gets involved in recorded music. Why? They have nothing to do with recorded music. That's where the penny rate for mechanical royalties comes from. It comes from sheet music. So publishers of sheet music then became publishers in recorded music for no other reason that they happened to be there at the time, and I guess were allowed enough voice to say, we should get a piece of that. So now they administrate the publishing, and they collect the mechanical for the composer, I guess because a lot of the composers of the music weren't necessarily the musicians who played on the recording. So now you've got, in the early days, you got a record label that spends, there is a risk for a record label. You got to spend the money to make the record, and then you have to spend money to promote it and get it into the stores and try to collect money. And being that I'm on both sides of the equation, I understand how both sides work.
I'm on one side of it.
And the unfortunate thing is for the artists, they were getting screwed because they were, they're the ones making the music, and yet they're getting less money than the people producing it and producing the records and all that sort of stuff. The biggest problem was the ownership, because if the musicians had kept the ownership of those recordings, it would have been a different story. But I understand, from the perspective of the record company, you're taking the risk because you're laying out all the cash.
Yeah, exactly.
It's complex. It's somewhat complicated, but the terms were not favorable for the artist at all. The record company and the publishing thing, which is ridiculous. Why there should be a third party getting publishing money from these artists is ridiculous. And then the record company started making these contracts where, they would have these options like, okay, we're going to make a record for you, and then we have the option to make another one if we want to, and it's going to be under the same terms. So obviously when a band or a musician comes to someone and they're unknown, well, the record company's taking a big chance. And if they make a hit record, well, now the record company and the artist are going to make some money, but the terms of the contract can't be renegotiated now that the artist is successful, and that was unfair. And in fact, I'm sure you probably may be aware that some artists sued, including Prince and others, basically saying we're indentured servants because you have this contract that's just ongoing, and we have no way to renegotiate it once we become successful. And it's an unfair contract because the label's making the majority of the money, and the artist is not making nearly as much as they should.
I was gonna say on that, my record label's called Indie Product. I started it in 2011, and then I disbanded it in 2014. But I brought it back to life to serve the Philippine punk rock community. And one thing that I tell every artist that I put out, which it's mostly CDs and cassettes, I refuse to hold any sort of contract. Like literally, I make 100 CDs, I will actually give the artist like 25 CDs plus a share of the money. Some artists, since they're having a really difficult time over there, I've just given all the royalties to, as long as I recoup the cost of production. Like let's say I finished the first 100 CDs. If they don't want me to print anymore, I just won't. Because I don't want to screw people over. And
that's great, but you have to understand when it scales up. So if you're selling millions of records, there's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, I know that much.
When we started our label and I understood how this business worked, I said immediately, being that we're a band, we're doing this not to make money. I'm not saying that if we make money that's a bad thing, and we're fine to make money, and we want to make money for us and we want to make money for the band. So immediately I said our deal is going to be 50-50 profit share. So after the cost of after all the expenses are recouped, we split the profits with the band 50-50. We don't do mechanicals. We don't pay mechanicals. I always said so many bands break up because of mechanical royalties. It's instituted for all these years in the record business, but I think it's shitty especially it's shitty for bands, because usually in a band there's one, maybe two people that write most of the songs. But when you start out as a band, you don't sit there and discuss, are we all in this together and we're going to split the money equally, or because you know, Bill or Susie writes most of the songs, are they going to get more? They don't do that. And then what happens is the way the business is set up, if your band does pretty well, the bands are getting the record royalties and they're splitting those, but then, you know, the lead songwriter is getting those mechanical royalty checks, and that ends up starting to build resentment
Yeah.
of people in the band going, well, we all wrote the song, and the guy, you know, the guy or the girl who wrote the majority of it or came in with all the lyrics or came in with the idea for the song is saying, well, actually, no, I wrote it. And then, you know, that breaks up bands all the time. So I just said, the problem here is that bands need to sit down and understand that this is a business and decide for themselves when they start of how are we going to split this up? Are we going to acknowledge that one person should get more money because they write the songs, or are we going to split it up evenly? A lot of bands go into this idealistically and say, well, we're a band and we're all together and we all work together equally, so we should split it. But, you know, after a year or two, if you start touring a lot and you start getting popular, you start seeing that things may change. So my philosophy was, it's up to the band to figure out how they want to split the money. We're just going to give them 50%, and here, do with it as you will. You know.
Yeah, I agree that that's a good idea. I'm like I said, unless I end up giving all the royalties to the artist, that's usually what I do is just 50-50 because 30-70 is too cheap, 60-40 is still too cheap. 50-50 is just fairness after the cost of reproduction. But you have a split with what's the band's name? I just had it on here.
Swinging Utter.
No, not Swinging Utters. Fuck. I literally just forgot. Oh, Vicious Circle. Vicious Circle.
Oh yeah, from Australia.
Yeah, how did that split come to be?
Somebody from the band just wrote us and said, hey, you know, we want to do something. I mean, usually when we have stuff from, when we do something with another label, we do a license like that. In those days, it was because we were friends with the band or we were interested in the band. We liked them, they liked us, whatever. And also we wanted to try and get something out in that country because it might help us to be able to go out and tour, because that was one of the things we like to do. We like to travel and tour. And we realized that having a record out in the country we wanted to go on tour was good for us because, number one, it would lower the price because imports usually cost a lot of money. Number two, it would give us exposure working with local bands who would then be on the ground helping promote. And then they also meant that's a contact that can help us to organize a tour.
Yeah, I just realized it's not the band that I thought it was, because I know Keith Morris was in a band called, I think, Vicious Circle. Or maybe it was him or Jack Grisham. There's an American punk band named Vicious Circle, so that's not who you did a split with then?
No.
I've never actually heard the split before. I can't find it. I've always wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Vicious Circle out of Long Beach was the sort of predecessor of TSOL.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't know why I thought about Keith Morris. Yeah, funnily enough, I've interviewed almost every member of TSOL. Like, current and past. Jack Grisham was my first ever interview in 2017. Only problem is, after I ended the recording, I was using Windows Vista, and it corrupted, so I lost it. But I've interviewed him, soon Ron Emery and Mike Roach, but soon Greg Kuhn, but Tiny, Joe Wood, you know, half of them. I'm a pretty huge fan of them, and I'm really glad that I got contact with you. So how many albums does Youth Brigade have altogether?
Well, the two versions of Sound and Fury. Then we have a bunch of little 7 inches done. You know, I can't even count all the stuff that was released through other labels on limited editions. Like there's an Italian version, there's a French version, there's some splits here and there. But just the main albums that we released on BYO would be the two versions of Sound and Fury, the EP Come Again, and when we got back together in the 90s. Yeah, Happy Hour. Sell the Truth, and then the split with Swing and Utters. Those would be the stuff that we released on our label. And then there's the Brigade too, which released one album and one EP.
And then the good, bad, and ugly.
What's that?
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Oh yeah, that's a German one. That's a
Oh,
live version. Yeah.
nice. So you said Youth Brigade broke up in '87. Are you still active today at all?
Yeah, we just played shows in December and January. We were up in San Francisco. We did a quick tour with like a little short West Coast thing with can't remember the name. Russ's band. We played in where did we go? We did LA, Pomona, Arizona, San Francisco, San Diego, Orange County too, I think. I can't remember. That was in January. And then we did a few shows around. We did a show in Bakersfield. We did another show out in the valley at some Sun Valley Hall. So we played a few, and then of course COVID hit, so we haven't done anything. So basically we were getting ready for Punk Rock Bowling.
Oh yeah, PRB, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you are you pretty good friends with the Fat Rat crowd?
Oh yeah, a lot of those people.
Yeah, I was actually gonna go to PRB this year, and then COVID hit. It was gonna be my very first time ever, and I'm sad now because it's an if it'll happen and when.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that it'll happen in the spring for Memorial Day weekend again. We'll see.
Well, they tell people the Spanish flu only lasted 2 years. The bubonic plague lasted 3. I think this one, I'm gonna give it till 2021. Like some people are saying 22 or 23. I don't think it'll last that long because COVID's not as bad as previous pandemics. But
I think that the thing is the difference between comparing this to previous plagues like Spanish influenza 100 years ago or the bubonic plague is that science is able to treat things a lot better now than it was in those days, and the reason those lasted much longer is because there was no treatment.
Well, that's what I tell people.
Unfortunately, containment of it is the only treatment that is the main treatment of it right now, and this country's failing miserably on on containing it. So, and despite the fact that just across the border in my home country of Canada, they've been totally successful
You're
at
from
containing
Canada?
it. And yeah, we're from Canada. We were born and raised in Toronto. Moved here when I was 10.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, we say in Cinque, California, we say, and actually from Canada.
I'm just a little sleepy in the head sometimes. That I've heard that song a million times.
Yeah, no problem.
I've got dyslexia of the brain. I'll hear something, and then like the 450th time I've heard it, I'll finally actually hear a certain lyric. I was like, holy shit, I didn't hear that before.
Right. Yeah, it happens. Or you hear a lyric and you think, wow. You read the lyrics and you go, wow, that is completely different than what I thought it said.
You know the song Sinister Rouge by Bad Religion?
No, can't say I do.
Well,
maybe I've probably heard it, but
it's on Empire Strikes First or something like that. But I've listened to this song a million times at least because Bad Religion is my favorite band of all time, and I finally heard Greg Gaffin say, well, paraphrasing, talking about the Jesuits and how they control things, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, there's a line where he says, something Jesuits holding sacred conference, and I was like, oh shit, that's kind of politically deep there. I have never heard that line before.
Huh. So is it based on historical fact or is it a conspiracy theory?
I don't know enough to speak on that. I just know that I've got a buddy who does the gematria system. He's into that, and he talks about how the Jesuits control everything. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of why I heard Greg Gaffin say that for the first time, because that word, because my buddy always talks about the Jesuits, and I was like, what the fuck? Greg Gaffin just talked about this too. Oh my god. It's funny the shit you notice when you're not even trying.
Yeah.
But I was gonna ask you another question, not really related to the interview, but do you have any pressings of your records at all?
Well,
Like,
yeah. I mean, we have copies, sure.
could I buy a couple signed from you? That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you can send me an email of what it is you want. I'll look because, like I said, we're switching over with these other people, so some of the stuff's been out of print for a while, and they're planning on doing some, I don't know, changing stuff around. But tell me what you're looking for, and I'll take a look and see what I've got.
Pretty much anything you're willing to send me, honestly. I'm not gonna be picky. I want to see you
Yeah.
live so fucking bad, but I don't know if it's gonna happen because I leave towards 2021 back to the Philippines, and I'm so sad. I've seen Bad Religion live, No Effects live. I think I've seen Citizen Fish. I can't remember. I think I either did or didn't, but I haven't seen many live. That's kind of why I do interviews, because since I'm from a small town in Kansas, I live in Illinois now, but where I lived, no buses, no trains, nothing. If you don't have a vehicle, you're screwed, and no band plays anywhere near me. And so that's
Oh,
why
well,
throughout my life I don't have any awesome punk rock stories from shows.
why are you living in a small town in Illinois?
No, and now I live in a pretty big city in Illinois, but I used to live in a small town.
Uh,
I got the hell out because there's no pulse on the ground.
yeah.
'Cause I need to. That's why I interview musicians now, because I can't see them live.
Gotcha.
Have you heard of Reality Check TV from San Francisco, California?
Can't say that I have.
They're kind of. Have you heard of Nardwar, the Human Serviette?
Yeah.
He is like my idol when it comes to doing this. Like when I first started watching him probably 10 or 12 years ago, and I just admired how that guy can just pull facts that I don't know how. I still to this day don't know how he does it. He'll pull facts out of the hat that blows the artist away.
Well, he reads a lot. That's how you get. That's how you get information. You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I spend like every single day reading articles and watching other interviews and this and that. That's why I know about BYO. But, I mean, some of the things that he'll bring up are just so deep in the crevices that you're like, Nardwar, how the shit did you know what street this person grew up on?
Because before he does the interview, he does a lot of research and investigation, so that when he goes to do the interview, he's asking the questions that most people don't ask.
I need to really try that, honestly, because that would...
Well, take it from me. I've been doing interviews with people for over, 35, 37, 38 years. It's not a lot of work. You know the people who do you can tell the difference between the people who've done their homework and preparation versus the people who are coming into it asking you the questions that are easily, that they could have found easily if they'd taken the time in it. And people, I'll tell you this, I don't know about all musicians, but for me, since I've been doing this a long time, musicians appreciate when people come up and ask them about esoteric shit that most people don't ask about, because how many times can you tell your origin story and your history? Most of that information is readily available in the bio stuff that you have online.
Yeah, I get you.
So
the biggest reason I actually ask even bands that I just know, like I know TSOL, I know yours. The reason I ask it though is because like Keith Morris once told me in my interview with him, he'll answer the most generic of questions, because what if perhaps one of my viewers has never heard of you before, and now that I've asked you that, oh shit, now they know who Youth Brigade is. That's the reason I ask questions I know.
Oh, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying, and it depends on the format. If you're doing an interview that you're going to broadcast on video or live, I can understand that. But at the same time, you can always get around that by doing an intro before you do the interview. right?
I didn't think about that.
I
Yeah.
mean, lots of people do interviews, and I most of the interviews I see are done in print because I prefer to read than to watch. But you can always do a forward going, basically going, this is so and so. They've been in such and such band. They've done this and blah 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 blah. And now you've got the highlights, so that when you get into the interview with the person, you can talk. Well, most reasons that people do interviews, musicians especially, it's they're trying to promote something, their latest release, their latest whatever they've done. Of course, now that's less and less because there isn't a lot of new stuff being done, and there's no tours to be promoting. So
Yeah, I was gonna
it's
ask. You have another song I
yeah.
was gonna ask you about. Is the song "Better Without You" about anyone in particular?
Um, no, no, it wasn't about a specific person. It was more about. It's really more about how people stay in bad relationships. Um, and I find it. My philosophy is I'd rather be alone and happy than in a relationship and miserable.
Yeah, that makes
And I know,
sense.
I've just, it's hard to understand, and I got a better understanding of it now as I'm older. But it was always hard for me to understand why someone would stay in an abusive relationship, whether it's physical or mental or whatever. There's really no reason that you should be with someone if they don't make you happy. If you're constantly fighting and arguing, um, there's really there's no benefit to that. What's the purpose of it?
Yeah, I get what you mean. I was gonna say, if what do you prefer to put Youth Brigade or any type of music out on, cassette, CD, or vinyl these days?
I have no preference. I mean, I think that's really for the person who wants to listen. I think vinyl is great, but vinyl has its drawbacks. I know, I grew up with vinyl, and I think it sounds great, but I also remember that you have to change the music every 20 minutes or so. You have to flip the record over, um, and they're heavy, they're large, they take up a lot of space. They're kind of a pain in the butt to store,
Yeah, I
and I
get you.
have a lot of records. CDs are great because you can put multiple CDs on, and they're just easier to deal with in that sense. But then you have digital, which is even better in the sense of I can just make a playlist off of my iTunes and play DJ, and I don't have to do anything. And then if there's a song that comes on I don't really want to hear it, I just hit next or I hit shuffle.
Yeah.
So if when you're sitting around and you just want to listen to music, it's things are so different now. When we were growing up, you would sit down to listen to music. I mean, it was an experience. You'd go out, you'd be looking forward to an artist releasing a record. You would sit there while you listened to the music, reading the liner notes and reading the record label and trying to understand, what's going on, whether they put out the lyrics on the lyric sheet or you had to figure them out. And plus, when I grew up, we were smoking a lot of weed while we were listening to music too. So
Nice.
it was a whole experience. You really sat down and listened to it. I don't know that people do that as much anymore.
Oh,
Maybe
I
they
do.
do. Maybe kids do. I'm not really sure. I guess they may because now that weed is legal here, lots of
It's
people are
legal in
smoking.
Illinois. I smoke every day.
Yeah. So I mean, sitting around listening to music and smoking weed, it's great. I mean, there are songs, especially now that everything's up on the internet. There are songs now that I'm pulling out from when I was a kid and haven't listened to in 40 years. Um, that I just remember how we used to sit. We used to sit in the alley or in the treehouse or whatever. We had lots of different places where we would party and hang out and just get stoned and listen to the whole album. I mean, and that's the thing. When you're stoned, you have to get up. Oh, someone's got to get up and flip the record after playing. It's a fucking pain in the ass. But yeah, so for me, I don't really have a preference. I think these days I prefer all my music's on the computer now, and I just listen to it through a Bluetooth speaker. I have Sonos, which aren't very good. I mean, sound quality wise, they're great, but software sucks.
I'm a little different because, as I said, I'm married in the Philippines, and ever since I lived there, they have a huge cassette market. And I never really gave a shit about cassettes during life because in this country, cassettes have been pronounced dead for a long time. But in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, oh my god, if you don't release it on cassette, it's not going to sell. And so I've got about 100.
Because cassettes are so cheap,
Yeah.
it's really easy to they're cheap to make, and so people sell them for cheap. I mean, when we went to Europe in '84, I mean, there was a whole black market in the Eastern European places of cassettes because they were cheap. So there were all these bootleg cassettes of stuff. Everything was bootlegged on cassette.
Oh yes. I got a fancy I've got like 4 different cassette players, but one of them I prefer the most because, like you said, with the vinyl, you gotta flip it over. With cassette, you gotta flip it over. I've got an auto reverse cassette player, and I love it so much. Because when I'm laying in bed halfway across the room and the tape's over, I'm like, motherfucker.
Yeah, but the problem with cassettes is that they have a pretty short life. I mean, they wear out, they break, the tape breaks.
Or gets eaten.
The thing is, before cassettes existed, there was an 8-track that didn't last very long because the 8-track started bleeding, so that it would bleed in the one side and the other because they were using both sides of the tape, and that was a mess. And that format died out quick, and cassettes came in and took over from the 8-track. But yeah, I mean, all those physical things are great, but they're just not going to last very long.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who actively collects 8-tracks. I know a lot of people who collect tapes, and I know I got 2 friends who collect reel-to-reels, but I don't know anyone who touches 8-tracks. Those are just a waste of money.
Well, yeah, well, they just fell apart. Plus, it didn't last long because it was a flawed technology. I mean, they're all flawed technologies. Every technology has its limits.
Yeah.
Vinyl has stood up the test of time, and a lot of people really like it because of the sound quality is different than when you digitally record.
Did Youth Brigade ever come out on 8-track at all, or reel-to-reel?
No.
Okay.
No. We did release cassettes back in the 80s.
Do you have any?
No, I have no cassettes left.
Damn it.
We threw most of them away. Anything that was left, we threw away because we couldn't sell them anymore. We had some lying around for a while, but we just ended up throwing them away because there's just no point.
Yeah,
no one was going to buy them anymore.
And also because I've lived in the Philippines. I've also lived in Japan. I've been to 44 to 50 states. I've traveled a lot in the last 7 years. And cassettes and digital, I mean, I have a super massive vinyl collection, but it's kind of stationary because, as you know, it's hard to carry them around, whereas you can toss 100 cassette tapes in a backpack and in your tape player with some batteries and you're good to go.
Yep.
So
but when the Walkman came out, and then before the iPhone came out, you had iPods. I mean, those were great because now you can put all these songs on this one phone-sized thing and put your headphones on and listen to thousands of songs. It was awesome.
Hell yeah, it is. I just try to do whatever I can to support artists. Sometimes it's harder to, like, the Freeze, right, in the FUs?
Yeah, of course.
So, I'm good friends with John Socks and Cliffhanger, and, it was a Freeze. They released Calling All Creatures in 2019, and I literally had no idea they had a new album out until I talked to Cliff. I interviewed him, and he brought it up to me in person, and I was like, oh shit, you do? He's like, yeah, we just released a new album, and it's the fucking label's fault for not, they didn't promote it, they didn't do anything. It was like and then I guess 6 months later, Cliff and them had a problem with the label, and now it's almost impossible to find their newest album.
Yeah, but the thing to me is, why did they not just release it on their own?
I have no idea.
Bands been coming to me for, we haven't put a record out on our label. Our label, as far as being an active label, we haven't done anything since 2009, and bands always would be hitting me up saying, "Hey, would you release our record?" And I'd say, "For what? I mean, first of all, you can release it on your own. What do you need me for? Basically, I'm a bank loan, so I'm going to spend the money to manufacture LPs and CDs so that you can take them on the road to sell. There's barely any stores left for me to sell those in, so I'm not going to be able to even recoup my money probably. So then I'm going to have to worry that you're going to pay me my percentage of the money from the sale of the records just to cover the cost. Why do I want to do that? Just go get a loan from a bank and get a very low interest loan. You can manufacture the records and do all the stuff yourself, and you'll get to keep all the money."
That's what I'm trying to do with the 2 albums that I've made so far. I'm a noise musician. I'm looking at the BYO page and on Discogs. I see you have a lot of releases by 7 seconds as well as SNFU. What was the most other than obviously your band? What was the most? I guess who would be your top artists on BYO?
Well, the biggest selling record we ever released was the No Effects Rancid split, of course, because that,
I own
those are both bands that have both of those bands have gold records out, platinum records. Well, Rancid, I believe, has platinum. I don't know about the No Effects ever going platinum, but for sure they both have multiple gold records. So that was our biggest release by far. Nothing ever even close. But yeah, I mean the bands that have sold the most records on the label besides that split would be 7 Seconds and Youth Brigade. Those splits did really well. The Briefs have done pretty well. Leatherface has done pretty well. SNFU, of course. We have those bands that we released back in the 80s that most of them did pretty well. So that's us and 7 Seconds and SNFU. The Aggression record did okay. And then, like I said, in the 90s and the 2000s, Leatherface, The Brief, and the split records was the biggest things we ever had, because on the Bouncing Souls too, we had the Bouncing Souls first 2 records.
Oh shit!
Although
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a co-release with their label Chunksaw, and then those records reverted back to Bouncing Souls, so they're no longer in our catalog. But we released both of those records originally and had them for a few years and did really well. Damn. And then they went to Epcat. Yeah, and Hepcat, we released one Hepcat record. We still have that. Yeah.
Well, who's Junior Gone Wild?
It's this Canadian band, sort of like punk pop with a little country tinge. Good band, good, very good pop songwriters. Like the record a lot. Never sold much of anything. They didn't have their shit together to go out and really tour much. So unfortunately, there's a lot of bands that we find that we like, and we work hard, put a record together, and the band just falls apart. Like I was saying before, it's that's a big part of it is we can show a band how to maybe not sell 1 million records, but how to earn a living playing music.
Yeah.
If they're willing to work hard, and some of them get it, and a lot of them don't.
I would. I do DoorDash for a living, but I'm hoping that my record label can at least pay my way in the Philippines. I'm not expecting it to pay my way here. In the Philippines, you gotta make like $300 to $500 a month just to survive, which is nothing in our currency, but kind of hoping I can survive on that there, because foreigners aren't legally allowed to work in that country. You can't just apply for a Jollibee or a random job over there. You gotta have your own business. So that's a big reason why I've done that. And because I love the scene over there.
Yeah.
But I think that's I think I've talked to you about everything I can think of. BYO, Youth Brigade. Do you have any other bands that you'd like to bring up at the moment that you've been a part of?
I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Cool. And you said that just send you a message with the stuff that I wanted to get from you?
Yeah, tell me what you're interested in. I'll take a look and see what I got. I mean, like I said, I don't have a ton of stuff left. Most of it's all with the new people we've been spending the last 6 months transferring everything over to them. So
I get you. All right, thank you so much, Shawn. I really appreciate this, man.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a lovely
Appreciate it.
day.
All right, you too. Bye bye.